What happens when a country that once slapped heavy tariffs on US goods suddenly decides to lift them? This is exactly what Turkey has just done. Ankara has announced that it is removing additional duties on US imports like cars, alcoholic beverages, tobacco, and cosmetics. On paper, it looks like a simple trade adjustment, but behind this move lies a complex story of diplomacy, economics, power politics, and calculated risks. Today we ask, who truly gains and who loses from Turkey's surprising U-turn? To understand this moment, we need to go back to 2018. Under the Trump administration, the US imposed steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from several countries, including Turkey. Steel imports from Turkey faced a 50% tariff, while aluminum faced a 20% levy. Washington justified this under national security concerns, but for Ankara, it was seen as an economic attack. Turkey responded with its own measures, imposing additional duties on US cars, rice, tobacco, alcoholic beverages, cosmetics, and other goods. This tit-for-tat played out during one of the lowest points in US-Turkey relations. At the time, Ankara was also in the middle of a financial crisis, with the Turkish lira plummeting. The tariffs were not just about economics, they symbolized a deeper rift between two NATO allies. Fast forward to 2025. The Turkish Trade Ministry has now announced that it is ending these additional obligations, citing progress in negotiations with the US and consultations under the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement mechanism. This move comes just days before President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan is scheduled to meet US President Donald Trump at the White House, following their attendance at the UN General Assembly in New York. This timing is no coincidence. The tariffs that once represented defiance are now being lifted as a symbol of reconciliation. On September 22nd, Turkey officially declared the termination of these retaliatory tariffs. The ministry's statement emphasized two key points. First, that talks with the United States have been positively progressing, and second, that WTO panel reports factored into the decision. The announcement also highlighted an ambitious target. Turkey and the US aim to raise their bilateral trade volume to $100 billion. This is a striking goal when compared with their current annual trade of around $30 billion. To achieve this, barriers needed to fall, and Turkey has chosen to act first. Yet the decision raises questions. Why now? Why unilaterally? And what is Turkey expecting in return? Diplomatic reset. Erdoğan's visit to Washington is framed as a reset moment. The two countries have clashed over issues ranging from Syria to defense systems, but lifting tariffs signals goodwill. WTO pressure. Turkey's reference to WTO panel reports suggests that it faced legal pressure to conform. Prolonging the tariffs risked further disputes. Trade ambition. The $100 billion target is both economic and symbolic. For Ankara, showing willingness to open its market builds credibility. Energy bargain. Around the same time, Turkey's state energy firm BOTAŞ signed a 20-year LNG deal with US supplier Mercuria. Energy may be the real currency of this rapprochement. Domestic economics. Turkey has been battling inflation and currency volatility. Lifting tariffs reduces costs for Turkish businesses and consumers, especially in sectors reliant on imported goods. Strategic leverage. By making the first move, Ankara may be expecting concessions from Washington, perhaps a rollback of US tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum, or a softer approach on sanctions. This mix of motives makes clear that Turkey's action is not a mere gesture, it's a calculated investment in future leverage. US exporters. American companies selling cars, tobacco, alcohol, and cosmetics now face fewer barriers in Turkey. For example, US automakers who once found Turkey's market prohibitively expensive can now compete more effectively. Turkish importers and consumers, importers who struggled with high duties gain relief, while consumers may see lower prices or greater variety. For middle-class Turks, US cars or branded cosmetics could become more accessible. Energy sector. Cooperation. Turkey gains credibility as a stable partner by signing major LNG deals with US companies, cementing its role as a regional energy hub. Diplomatic relationship. The broader US-Turkey relationship may benefit. This move can be used by both governments to claim progress and strength in negotiations. Foreign investors. By reducing trade friction, Ankara signals a more predictable business environment, potentially attracting investment. Turkish domestic producers, local car assemblers, cosmetics firms, and even tobacco producers may face tougher competition from cheaper US imports. Turkish government revenues, tariffs generate income, and removing them means less direct revenue unless trade volumes rise significantly. Other exporters, European or Asian exporters competing in Turkey, may lose relative advantage as US products become more competitive. Nationalists and protectionists. Politically, Erdoğan risks backlash from groups who view tariff removal as surrendering to US pressure. Potential strategic autonomy. If hidden concessions were made, whether on defense policy, sanctions, or regional alignments, Turkey may have compromised part of its autonomy. Critics warn that while tariffs are lifted, non-tariff barriers may still block smooth trade. Others argue that Turkey's move could weaken domestic industries at a vulnerable moment. There is also the risk of over-reliance on the US. If Washington's policies shift again, as they did dramatically in 2018, Turkey could be left exposed. Moreover, the scale of the tariff removal remains unclear. Officials say certain US products are affected, but not all. This ambiguity may limit the overall economic boost. Analysts are already suggesting that this move may be tied to secret deals. Some speculate that Turkey offered tariff removal in exchange for US flexibility on defense technology or even sanctions. Others believe energy was the true bargaining chip, with LNG supplies forming the backbone of this new chapter. There are also whispers about lobbying pressure. Major US corporations, particularly in the automotive and consumer goods sectors, may have pushed hard for Ankara's concession. And geopolitically, Turkey's recalibration may connect to wider US strategies, balancing Russia, containing Iran, and stabilizing NATO cohesion. As we look ahead, several indicators will reveal whether this tariff removal is a turning point or a temporary adjustment. Will the US respond? The key question is whether Washington will reciprocate by reducing its tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum. Without reciprocity, Ankara's move risks appearing one-sided. Trade volume growth monitoring. Whether the US-Turkey trade balance truly expands toward the $100 billion target will determine if the policy shift delivers results. Energy agreements. The 20-year LNG deal is only one part of a growing energy partnership. How Turkey integrates US energy into its market will show how central this bargain is. Domestic backlash, watch Turkish industries and political factions. If local producers start to suffer, criticism of Erdoğan's strategy could intensify. Regional geopolitics. Turkey's foreign policy, whether in Syria, Ukraine, or vis-à-vis Russia, may shift subtly if hidden concessions were part of the deal. The removal of tariffs may seem small in dollar terms compared to the scale of US-Turkey trade, but symbolic moves can matter more than financial flows. For Ankara, signaling openness to US imports at this moment is about positioning. Turkey has been under pressure from multiple sides: EU tensions, US sanctions, Russian influence, and Middle Eastern conflicts. Reopening doors to the US sends a message to markets and to allies that Ankara is not isolated. Economically, Turkey is seeking stability. Inflation has eroded purchasing power, and the lira has suffered repeated blows. Lowering import costs, even selectively, can help soften inflation's bite. At the political level, Erdoğan's decision reflects a balancing act. Domestically, he must present this as a pragmatic step for the nation's prosperity. Internationally, he must leverage it to extract concessions. Meeting Trump at the White House shortly after the announcement is strategic theatre. Both leaders can frame this as a win. Trump as evidence that tariffs worked by forcing Turkey to back down, Erdoğan as proof of securing better US access and building stronger ties. The optics matter as much as the policy. Turkey's strategic geography, straddling Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, means its trade decisions are never purely economic. By removing tariffs, Ankara aligns closer to Washington at a time when Russia and China are deepening ties. Some analysts suggest this is part of a broader pivot, positioning Turkey as a bridge for US goods and energy into the region. Others caution it may simply be tactical, Erdoğan playing the US and Russia off each other. If this move leads to dependency, Turkey risks eroding its bargaining power. For example, if US cars flood the Turkish market, local producers may shrink. If energy becomes tied too closely to US suppliers, Ankara may have less flexibility with Russia or Qatar. Similarly, political deals struck in secret could limit Turkey's room to maneuver in Syria or vis-à-vis Kurdish groups. Energy swap theory, the LNG deal was the real driver, tariffs were just a cover. Defence trade-off, Ankara may expect access back into the F-35 programme or lighter sanctions for its S-400 missile purchase from Russia. Sanctions. Relief, Turkey could be angling for relief on banking restrictions and dollar access. Lobby pressure, US corporations like automakers and consumer giants may have lobbied aggressively in Washington to secure tariff relief. Turkey's removal of tariffs on US imports is far more than a bureaucratic adjustment. It's a geopolitical signal, an economic gamble, and a political play all at once. For US exporters and Turkish consumers, this is good news. For Turkish producers, it may bring pain. For both governments, it's a moment to claim victory in front of domestic audiences. But the real test lies ahead. Will this move actually lead to the $100 billion trade relationship Ankara envisions, or will it simply shift the balance of winners and losers without delivering long-term growth? The answer depends on whether Washington responds in kind, whether domestic industries can adapt, and whether energy and defence deals form the true foundation of this thaw. This is a story that will not end with tariffs. It's about the shape of US-Turkey relations for years to come.